Welcome back. 1,600 delegates from over 60 countries are gathered in Abidjan in Cote d'Ivoire for the 2018 Africa CEO Forum. The main theme for this year's discussion is how Africa's economic development agenda is being changed and how it has to adapt to new disruptive technologies. This is something software company Microsoft has been looking at and has been working with a new generation of entrepreneurs as they navigate their way through a new future for the continent. Peter Ndoro found out more when he spoke to Amrote Abdella from Microsoft 4afrika initiative.
One of the challenges that we have on the continent is that our countries are at different levels of development. We talk about this fourth industrial revolution and broadband and big data, but some countries don't even have electricity. How do we're trying to leapfrog using all of this technology, but some people are so far behind. How can they catch up using this kind of technology if we're struggling with just issues of power?
Look, I absolutely hear you, and you are right in raising that. But even in hacking some of those problems, you look at the problems that Cote today out of Kenya is trying to solve, right? Very much at the heart of energy, right? So today, if you think about sort of, what does Cote do? Yes, it's an asset financing solution provider, but based on the premise that today connectivity and affordable access to electricity and power and energy is very limited in Africa, right? And so if you don't have the basics, how do you go about driving the fourth industrial revolution, even sort of at a household level in terms of consumption? So I believe, and my belief and conviction is even stronger when you look at the problems that we're trying to solve. Again, yes, there is need for long-term investment in infrastructure, must be done. You look at education, you look at energy and some of the investments that have been very much accelerated over the last 3-4 years. But at the base of it, it can't be because we don't have those that we can't start adopting and innovating and hacking at some of the opportunities that we have in Africa. And look, and partly it's a private sector led, but it definitely has to be in partnership with governments as well around policy and regulation. And how do we actually make that a partnership that is viable and a win-win on all ends? The fourth industrial revolution is about sort of the big ideas and the changes, but in Africa it also means if you're talking about manufacturing, how do you have smart factories, right? And how do you do that while taking into account employment issues, and how do you drive energy crisis into that, and where do you start investing? So absolutely, I'm more optimistic. I think every year that we see the opportunities that are being unveiled, that we can actually do this.
All right, so one of the big areas for this forum is startups, and I know that you're very much involved in that. Give us a sense of what's happening on the continent. What are young people getting involved in? Because these startups are, I suppose, going to write the story of the continent for the future.
No, the startups are definitely, they have started writing and they will continue to write the narrative. But the basis of our innovation story starts with the startups, right? And I think what we have to do today, as we coined Silicon Savannah, the phenomenon that was happening with the iHub in Kenya. You have a lot happening in South Africa, in Nigeria, whether it's CC Hub, Ideas Lab, and there are a lot of hubs and accelerators that are popping up to nurture exactly this, like the startup ecosystem that's coming. But as we look beyond that, right, which is how do you then take them from a startup to then become small, medium enterprises, from then to become, proper multinational companies. So we also have to make sure that we are geared to tell the narrative beyond the startup, right? The startup is the starting point. A young guy, young girl coming together, a group of them with an idea and a hack to say, look, I can actually solve this, and there is money behind it, right? So there's a social, whether there's a pure business initiative and drive to be able to solve it. But we have to also be prepared to tell the larger story after that, right? So 3-4 years down the road, how do we make sure that they continue to succeed? Because the premise of us investing in the startup space is not so that they can just remain a startup, right? And so it's not so that people can go from one competition to the next and pitch their ideas, get $10,000 here, $5,000 there. So you have to go beyond the compreneurs, right? And get them to a stage where they're now becoming real businesses. And that's where we together collectively have to make sure that we handhold them, but also make sure that that journey is there as part of the starting point.